Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ananke Women in Literature Festival. We are at the panel Beyond Mangoes and Monsoons, How to Escape the Identity Trap and Own Your Voice as a South Asian Writer. Thank you, Sabine, for providing us this platform to have these meaningful and thoughtful conversations. I'll dive right in with an introduction of my wonderful guests here. Farah Ali is from Pakistan. She is the writer of the short story collection People Want to Live. Her work has been anthologized in Best Small Fictions and the Pushcart Prize, where it has also received special mention. Her stories have appeared in Shenandoah, Kenyan Review, Ecotone, and elsewhere. Her novel, The River, the Town, is forthcoming in 2023. Welcome, Farah. Faiqa Mansab. Faiqa Mansab is a Pakistani writer. Her debut novel, This House of Clay and Water, was published by Penguin India in 2017. It has been translated into Turkish and optioned for screen adaptation. Mansab's second novel is coming out in 2024 with Neem Tree Press UK and Penguin India. She has written for Lucy Writers Platform, Medusa Creatives, Tribune India, and others. She has an MFA in fiction with a distinction from Kingston University, London. Welcome, Faiqa. Soniah. Soniah Kamal is an award-winning novelist, essayist, public speaker. Her work has appeared in critically acclaimed anthologies and publications, including The New York Times, The Guardian, The Normal School, BuzzFeed, TEDx Stage, The Georgia Review, The Bitter Southerner, Catapult, and more. Sonia's novel, Unmarriageable, Pride and Prejudice in Pakistan, is featured on PBS Books, Publishers Weekly hails it as a must-read, and Shelf Awareness has said that if Jane Austen lived in modern-day Pakistan, this is the version of Pride and Prejudice she might have written. Accolades for Unmarriageable include a Financial Times Reader's Best Book, a People's Magazine pick, an NPR Code Switch, and New York Public Library Summer Read pick. A Library Reads pick, Books All Georgians Should Read, a Georgia Author of the Year for Literary Fiction nominee, is shortlisted for the 2020 Townsend Award for Fiction, and more. That's a lot. Welcome, Soniah. And finally, Rukhsana. Rukhsana Yasmin is an award-winning editor and a bookseller rising star. She has worked at independent publishers Saki, Profile, Serpent's Tail, and Jacaranda Books. Her freelance projects include editorial development and copy editing services in fiction and nonfiction for several organizations, including Virago, Penguin, HarperCollins, and Simon & Schuster. She is a former deputy editor of Masafiri and project officer at Commonwealth Writers. Rukhsana is a literary agent, most recently associate literary agent at the Good Literary Agency, and a trustee of the Center for Literacy in Primary Education. She lives in London and is currently working on her own life writing. A very warm welcome to all of you. Delighted to have you here. I cannot imagine a better panel for kicking off this conversation because I know some of you personally and others I have followed through your work. And I can say that all of you as authors have created a place for yourself in the literary world and a reputation based on owning your voice and the distinctiveness of what you stand for as a writer, including both subject matter and style. I'm trying to achieve two things here through this panel. One, I want to name the problem of finding your voice. And the second, I want to look at some solutions. Like if, for example, we were speaking to ourselves from the pre-first book deal, what would you say to that self as the wiser authors that you are now? So I think a good way to start would be if all of you could one by one just do a brief recap of your journeys in publishing so far. And I'm interested in knowing how your journey has been on two levels. So what was it on the outward level of the publishing and the book deal and the trials of that? But also, how did it map internally in terms of your journey into your own confidence and finding your voice, your struggles with self-doubt, etc.? I see Soniah grimacing already. All right, so let's start. Soniah.
Okay, starting with probably the most unhappy writer in the universe. Well, number one, I didn't want to be a writer. As I say in my TEDx talk, I wanted to be an actress, and coming from a Pakistani background, that particular dream was not allowed to me. And I'd always been writing from childhood, like, you know, like you sing in the shower. But so for me, storytelling was always there. And
Sonia, we lost you.
oh, am I back?
Yeah, you are.
Okay. So I would say that storytelling and writing chose me rather than the reverse. The advice I always give people is that when it comes to the creative arts, you have to be beyond passionate to get into this field, especially perhaps writing, because publication is not guaranteed to anyone. Sometimes it might never come, and if it does come, it might come so late in the game that you know it's taken a lot from you already by the time you're published. So unless you're extremely passionate that this is the creative field in which you've chosen or your soul has chosen to express itself, perhaps do something different. Now this might be a bleak perspective, but given my own journey and given the fact that I did not want to be a writer, so I wasn't fueled by that particular passion. It's been particularly difficult. I started writing professionally per se, meaning with an eye to get paid and published in 1996. I've had 6 agents in the US, 6 literary agents. I've had from small agents to literally some of the biggest agents there. After a 20-year period of trying to get published and trying to, have novels sent to editors, I've seen how the field has slowly changed in many respects. I think a lot of things have changed today, and it's so much better than it was definitely in 1996, when neither the internet was available, there was no real knowledge about anything. If something bad happened to you, like a book got picked up, then it got dropped, you thought you were the only person in the world that this calamity had happened to. And as we now know, thanks to the internet and more authors sharing their journeys, their stories, that's not the truth. That said, as a minority writer, and then a minority within a minority, at least in US terms, South Asian, but then not Indian per se, but Pakistani, sometimes a little harder, because whereas some countries might have a very sexy image about themselves, if you come from a country that does not necessarily have a sexy image in respect to publishing, and that's where the whole aspect of pandering and stuff comes up also, and does it happen, doesn't it happen? But just my own journey has been extremely hard, very tough. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. And yeah, like I said, people think that you get an literary agent, and your troubles are over. After 6 literary agents, I can assure you, your troubles are not over. So with that, I will pass it on.
All right. Okay. We can only get more hopeful from this point on. So, so Farah, would you like to cheer us up, perhaps?
I don't know. Yeah. I agreed with everything that Sonia said about I'm going to start kind of with the second question first. The getting an agent is not like, okay, all my work is done now and, stardom, here I come. It's such a different process for every person. Your book might be picked up by a publisher. It might not be the publisher that you had envisioned. It might get published and might not have as long a life in the eyes of the literary world as you had thought it should have. When you write a book, you have some kind of vision for it, not in a corporate sense, but a vision as in you literally envision it being talked about a little bit, or you're a human after all. So all of this is such a journey. And like a writer once said to me that writing is just a moving target. I'm going to get my short story published in a journal, and then I'll be so happy. And then comes the nominations, and then you're like, why didn't they nominate my story for so and so? And then I'll be fine if I get a book out. And then, it's just constantly something or the other. If it's reviews, or if it's lack of reviews, if it's conversations you want to be a part of. So for me, I'm really glad that my first collection was picked up by McSweeney's, because they work with voices that are not easily mainstream, that are not mainstream generally. And my novel also is picked up by an indie press. I don't have any experience with big publishing houses, but with my indie press experience, I do know that they give a lot of individualized love and attention to your work, maybe because of the nature of the press. Having said that, so there's that aspect of it. But once the book comes out, then you start looking automatically at lists, lists of mentions, and like, oh my God, social media is mental with that. There's the BuzzFeed list, and there's the so-and-so list, and then there's the top summer, top winter, top so-and-so. And if you're not in any of them, or if even if you know internally that it's not a mark of your work's merit itself to be or not to be on a list, but you still kind of seek your name elsewhere mentioned. And if it's not there, then it feels like a letdown. Like, oh, my book was published, but who's reading it? Is anyone reading my book? So for me, it has been, I have had to recalibrate my definition of why I write. It's not to be on lists. It's not to be mentioned. It's to find communities, again, like this panel here, for instance, and to find communities back in Pakistan for me as well, and among other pockets of writers. And what happens to the book happens to the book. That's beyond your control. Once it's published, it's out of your hands. So that is what the writing journey for me has been like. Sorry, Naima, are you able to hear me?
We can hear you, but
Okay.
where's Naima?
I think she's frozen.
Yeah. I mean, I can continue talking.
Yes, I think you should, Farah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I liked what you said, Sonia, about writing choosing you. Okay. So if she's let the meeting, then we are still being recorded. All right. Yeah. But for me, I have always been writing. Always. I think I wrote my first book when I was 4 years old or 5 years old. It was stapled and it had 2 cats, and I really thought it's gonna be on a bookshelf somewhere in Karachi. I have never not written, even though I went ahead and got an MBA and did a lot of other things not writing related, but seriously writing, I started it 7-8 years ago, but I've always been writing. So that's the other thing. No matter what happens to the book, I can't not write. So that has been what this journey so far has been for me. I can't say I've reached a Zen state, but I would like to say that with hopefully each successive book, I will hopefully get a little bit wiser. So
yeah, I can easily not write forever. So I think again that, I think that harkens back to, is this something that you've always wanted to do? And like for me, I cannot not dance. I cannot not twirl. I cannot not move, that sort of stuff is, and then that was another avenue that was not allowed me. But so I think, and like I said before, that I think it's that passion, it's that early knowing that this is how, again, I'm going to say your soul expresses itself, is what keeps you there, that no matter what happens, you want to continue writing because that's what you do. But with someone like me, or anyone who thinks that, they're going to write a book when they have free time and it's going to get published and this, that, and the other, that is just setting yourself up for a lot of internal disaster, because the rejections, the expectations, the everything can so not meet reality. And it's a very hard one to, writing is, I always see writing as 3 parts. It's the actual writing, then it's the publishing, but then there's the emotional aspect to it, It's seeing those lists. I mean, I have a running joke right now that the new list is going to be, writers still in the womb, and they're, they're literally going to be birthed with their novel out. Those lists, 20, under 20, or God knows what, 5 under 5. I mean, it's just younger and younger. And the thing is, like we know with aging, the more you age, the more grace you have, the more perspective you have, the more everything. And of course, there are a lot of younger people. We all started out very young who've written wonderful things. But to discount experience and stuff is also a very interesting battle, at least in the US sometimes.
I was just saying to somebody on LinkedIn in another context that I'm so tired of under lists, under 20, under 30. We need over lists, like 50 over 50, maybe 250 over 50. So yeah, right. I did drop out. There was a connection issue. I have no idea why. All right, Faiqa, perhaps you can take the relay from here.
Yeah. So the thing is, I also, I've been reading all my life. And I think as soon as you start reading and the kind of love that you have for books, it's very rare not to want to write, because when you love books, then you want to create something similar. And that's what happened to me. And at a very young age, I knew that I wanted to be a writer. So I've also been writing since, I think, the age of 11. I considered myself to be sort of the apprentice of all the writers I was reading. So I've been writing since then, and I would send it to, newspapers and stuff. And before this House of Clay and Water was published, I had about 8 to 10 unfinished or, sort of short novels that I had, written. But I never thought that, they were good enough. I always felt that I will write something better and then I'll get it published. So I seriously thought of myself as, I think, a writer when I finished this House of Clay and Water. And I thought, okay, this is something that I can put out into the world. This is, and so that's why I went for the MFA as well, because I wanted to take myself more seriously. I wanted to give myself that opportunity to test myself as a writer. And I think the MFA provided that. After having finished the novel, that's a whole another story. I mean, it's such a chaos. I mean, from that isolated life of a writer, which, some people romanticize. But for me, it was just my life. That's how it is. But afterwards, when I started pitching, it was a rude shock, because when I write, I just write for myself. I'm not thinking when this will get published, what will the publisher think, what will the reader think, I'm not doing any of that. So it took me, I think, a year to sort of understand that UK, US agents might not be right for this novel at all. And then I started pitching to Indian agents, and I got an Indian agent, Meeta Kapoor, and then, she pitched it to Penguin, and that was all very quick. So I think within 2 years, I had moved from UK, US agents to Indian agents, and then I got my agent and I got the book deal, and that was that. So I guess, I don't know. I mean, I don't sort of subscribe to luck as such, because I feel that is, short selling yourself. We've all worked hard, and all of us sort of, do the same thing. So I don't know, whatever that factor is, that's how it happened.
Okay. Rukhsana, as an agent and editor, you have chaperoned many books and, brought so many projects into the market. And you're aware of the challenges on both sides here, the writers as they struggle with their self-confidence, and also publishers as they seek the right projects. So what can you tell us about your journey of bringing works from South Asian writers into the market?
I think first we have to start with that publishing is a business. Yes, at the root of it, we all love books. We love the creativity, but publishers are taking big risks publishing your book. As a starting point, I don't know what it is now, but each book a publisher publishes, he's already, not just the advance, but he or she is already paying out 15 to 20 to 25,000 per book, printing, marketing, etc. Of course, budgets differ depending on the book and what they want to market the most. What they want to market the most is the one that will bring them the most income. So it may be, and books that they really truly believe in. Not to say that they don't believe in every single book, but you already know the marketing department can be quite shrewd and harsh. They'll know which book they think will bring them the most sort of revenue and income. Having said all of that, for myself, for instance, having been a commissioning editor, you have to be really passionate as you are about writing. You writers write. and writers are at the core. There would be no business without a writer, publishing business. So as passionate as you are about your book and getting it out in the world, your agent will have to be equally passionate and have a vision for your book. And as much as your agent and yourself, your passion, that should go to the editor. The editor will be equally passionate. So you've got the right chain of people to push it. And then if you've got the marketing and sales and publicity people on your side, you're hopefully in a win situation. It doesn't happen always. You may have lots of publicity, you may have lots of, support and all the reviews, but you may not get big sales. So for instance, the International Man Booker Prize, it's like, yes, what a great prize to win. But at the same time, it doesn't always sell many copies. And wanting to be on lists and all of those things, I think it's important, as you were saying, not to write for those lists. You write passionately for yourself and believe in yourself, but don't pander to the lists. I mean, I think that's just setting yourself up to be really, really hurt and damaged as a writer and put you off for life, Soniah, as you were saying. And it's something that I tell all my writers that I work with: write the book, and you end up being a sort of you do end up as being a mentor, guiding the book, navigating that space for them, and having given them the support. So once the book is ready to be published and you found a publisher, the agent sits in the corner and makes sure the publisher supports the writer and listens to the writer, because that can get lost amongst the in the production stage, in the marketing and sales, the way they pitch the book, and the cover may be awful. It may be, as lots of South Asian writers who have been published and African writers, I have to say, there'll be a tree, neem tree, a baobab tree, a mango tree, blah blah blah, orange sunset, and bittersweet in the description. And I hate that word, even though I have used it in the So you need someone on your side, and it's very hard. And as you were saying, Soniah, like in the 90s, it was horrible. And I similarly, I always wanted to, like I was saying, you read and read and read, and you think you're going to write a book. So I was similarly writing books about hedgehogs when I was 5, and I was obsessed, and that carried on. But I never had the confidence to write. And I also knew my parents would I wasn't expected to go to college or university or anything, but I fought back. And then my dad said, okay, you're going to go to university. You can go to university, you have to do a science. He said, you'd be a doctor. And I thought, that's never going to happen. And then he said biology, chemistry. The only science he didn't mention, because he didn't understand it, was physics. And I thought, I'm going to do physics. So that's what I did. And then, like you say, you sort of fell into publishing or, being an editor. And it felt like home to me. And I've not looked back once, except for when I'm penniless and I think, God, why did I do this? But I suppose as writers, you think of the same thing. It's so hard to be a writer. I can't remember how many years ago, but there was a survey, and whoever wrote in and said what advances they were going, did a study of what writers were getting paid, from the 6 figures to the 3 figures, if you like. And a few years ago, an average earning for a UK writer was £11,000 a year. Now it's £7,000 a year.
Yeah.
So you're not going to make it as a writer. You can't think for a moment that you're going to be earning a living from a writer. It does happen with time, but you have to be a realist. That's not going to happen overnight. You read about all these big deals and 3 book sales and all of those things, and J.K. Rowling's and etc. That's all you hear about in the media. You don't hear about the £2,000 deal, the £500 deal, the 3,000, 5,000, the 20,000. You don't hear about that, because we, as an industry, we don't even say how much we're getting paid. I don't know what other editors are getting paid. I don't know what other agents are getting paid, because we don't talk about money. It's just such a thing. And I wish we would. As a Pakistani, I talk about money all the time, because South Asians too. It's like, you get a job, my sister-in-law, how much are you getting paid? She doesn't care about anything else. How much are you getting paid? So in the UK, it's like a dirty word. You don't really talk about that. But I wish people would. And even when they're advertising for an editor, or agents don't advertise for a start. I've seen a couple of ads for agents. And if they don't say what the salary is going to be.
It's so interesting to hear it from your perspective, and you're saying that agents have to be just as passionate about a project, and then obviously the acquiring editors and so on and so forth. I think honestly at this time and age, the department that has to be most passionate, if anything, even if a book's going to be sold, is marketing.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think writers as such live within, there's always been a huge fear mentality within writers in general. But I think with minority writers, also a scarcity mentality, because as much as we want to think, and as much as there should be room for every book out there, everyone out there, and we've all grown up reading. I mean, I might not have wanted to be a writer, but I read, you know, I mean, ridiculous, you know, love books. But with the scarcity mentality and with the fear of, I mean, now a lot of us, like, these panels are so helpful in showing budding writers and stuff, the realities of the business. But back in the day, that wasn't the case. Like when I started, I really thought you wrote a book and it got published. And like I said, I easily found agents along the way. I've so far not had an issue with agents, but what I didn't realize was that as a minority agent, and I've had agents who are from the US. All my agents have been in the US, save one who was from India. But what I slowly realized over 20 years is that, yes, a book has to have a certain decent quality if it's going to sell, of course. But a lot of times, a lot of the agents were looking at what was already selling, you know. So Khalid Hosseini's Kite Runner did fabulously well, and suddenly they're looking for the next, you know, perhaps brown writer who's going to do that. An Eastern European writer's book does really well, and suddenly they're looking for the next. So sometimes, yes, the quality, of course, matters a lot. It should matter the most, but sometimes it's also the representation politics that come into it, and then so on and everything. And I slowly saw that happening, and then the paradox of me wanting to write books about certain topics that were dear to me and that I wanted to explore as a writer. But then these particular agents and editors who wanted me to write books that would actually sell, because like you said, this is a business. And slowly over time, writers understand that it is 99% business for the publishing world, whereas for you, it's not a business, right? So as writers, we write what we want to write, what we think is important, what's driving us. And then we're confronted with a business model, which none of us are taught to navigate, which sometimes, especially back in the day, catch you by complete surprise, because you think writing, because for a lot of writing, books and reading saved us, right? For me, being able to read books from my parents, books saved me. Like literally, books saved my life. Films did also, but definitely books too. So I came with this very, you know, fantastical thing about I'm going to contribute to that world and this, that. And suddenly I was confronted with marketing and agents and this, that. And just a quick word about people. I was published, my Unmarriable, my recent novel, was published by Penguin Random House in the US. And again, people think that if you're published by one of the big 5, 4, 6s, whatever they are now, you've got it made and you must have done this, that, and the other, and whatever. I've also, in the UK, Unmarriable was published by a small independent press, and I chose to go with them because I'd heard lovely tales about indie presses care more and this and the other. I can tell you, whether it's a big press like Penguin Random House America, or whether it's a small press, no matter where, it's your editorial team and the philosophy of that publishing house which is going to matter, not necessarily the size of the press. My UK press did dismally, and I'm still trying to get over it. Whereas Penguin Random House America, their team and everything, even though I was a small author for them, they treated me beautifully. And I remember when I first signed with them, I was so terrified because Unmarriageable, right? Look at the title. I thought they were going to insist that put more color, put more this, put monkeys, put this, put this. I remember saying that to my editor also, and to my pleasant, amazing surprise, she said, please write the book you want to write. It was so refreshing. It was so wonderful. And so I've had very interesting experiences where what I had assumed did not come to pass in either way, big press, small press, expectations, mangoes, monsoons, monkeys. So it's been an interesting journey that way too.
Great.
I've never heard of monkeys mentioned as a trope before, but that's a good one.
No, you know, and with my first book, when it was coming out, in fact, I ended up writing my Lit Hub essay for that. You know, when my authentic is your exotic,
Yes.
because the fact is, my authentic, my wearing the bindi, I wear bindis a lot. And I wear, you know, I this is my culture. I dress up in a certain way, you know. My wearing red lipstick is not because I'm going out on a date. It's because, for, you know, as Pakistanis, we dress up, we do whatever. We wear bangles. I wear parandas when I had longer hair. So the thing is, for me, this was my culture. I mean, eating a bloody mango is eating a mango, for God's sake. It's as much peeling a banana for me eating a mango. So suddenly I'm stuck thinking, oh, if I put a mango in, what will people, and that whole thing about what will readers think, what will people think, what will whatever. And again, perhaps that mentality came having come of age as a writer in the US and not in Pakistan, and seeing the exoticization of covers, like you said. I mean, the covers nowadays used to be sari covers with no head. Now it's heads and no bodies. So it's very interesting how it's evolved. But you know, I finally realized that to hell with everyone and everything. Mangoes, monsoons, parandas, bangles.
Monkeys.
The hell, I'm going to write whatever. And I think that's the conclusion we all come to, you know, Faiqa and etc. We all come to at the end of the day. This is our culture. There's no pandering going on. It was always fascinating to me how every Pakistani lit festival, the one question I'm asked without fail is, did you pander to the West? What? No, the opposite.
Sonia, I can't agree with you hard enough about write whatever the hell you want. I feel like listening to both sides of the argument, you're falling for a trope, but it's not a trope for me if I write about power outages or sleeping on the chat because, you know, the power is gone out. That was my childhood, or eating mangoes or whatever the hell. So for me, that's not a trope. And if it features in my story as an element that's bugging my character, I will put it in it. And yeah, I've been told sometimes that to small audiences that I've read to, that kind of portraying Pakistan in, like, you know, don't you think that it's going to underscore the problems that we have? And I'm like, I'm not setting out to do that, but, you know, you read what you read and I'll write whatever the hell I want to write. And yes, this write about the monsoons, write about the mangoes and the monkeys if you need to.
Exactly.
I agree. As an agent, I agree.
To what extent, Rukhsana, would you say is the landscape changing, if at all, in the past years, particularly with the rise of publishing houses and agents who specialize, you know, who have a dedicated focus to, you know, diversity or building out lists with different subject matters?
So I remember when my children were very little, we'd go to a bookshop and you'd look for a book with brown children in it, black children, any color, right? Apart from white. Not to denigrate white people, but just, you know, wanted something that the boys could relate to. And there wasn't anything. So I am happy to say that that has changed hugely. There still isn't enough. It is still happening. It's still taking time, but there have been huge improvements, I have to say. When I joined publishing, I used to be often the only brown person or black person or any person of color in the room. And then you suffer a massive imposter syndrome. But now I remember going to a launch event at some fancy place. And when I walked in late, of course, because that's who I am, the guy at receptionist was a black man, said, "Oh, the staff are going in that way, you're late." And I said, "Actually, I'm going to the event." So he said, "Oh." So I went upstairs and, you know, did what I had to do. And I found it very difficult to speak to everyone because it was all very, very white. And I was quite a young junior person. And then I had bumped into the bar staff, and one of the boys was actually my neighbor. So, what are you doing here? I spent the whole evening talking to him, a black boy. And that is often the case. Happily now I'm in a room and there's like, the majority of times, yes, you know, you're one of two brown people or a person of color, but it is changing hugely. I think there's a new, younger, you know, kind of cohort of people working in publishing, and there's so much energy and drive. But you do at the same time, and certainly for me, I think my generation, the idea of you head down, get on with it. You're scared to say, actually, and even if a brown author published a book, the book would not do well enough because there wasn't enough marketing and all sorts being spent on it. have to say in the last 5 to 10 years, especially after the terrible, Floyd, what happened to him in the US, it was like a day of reckoning, I think, for lots of industries about representation, about all of these difficulties and how, we're so behind, the institutional racism and the barriers that exist are so nuanced, you can't see them, but you can talk about them and try and explain your experience. And because there's so many younger people in publishing, it's suddenly changed the dynamic a little bit. There's still a lot of work to do, but now I go to a publishing house, I have meetings with editors and publicists who are from all walks of backgrounds. My thinking in terms of my experience in publishing is that, yes, race or color is a barrier, but I think more than that, sometimes it's about class. And that can be a barrier. A lot of, people who are being published, people of color who have been published are being published from whichever part of the world. They happen to have the security of income to enable them to write. So when we talk about, especially women writing later in life, you have a job to hold down, you have children. And then, although you don't necessarily think, oh, I'm going to write the book when I have time, you literally can't write until you have time. I am one of those people, I've been working in the publishing industry, wanting to write my own book. Now, hit 50, my boys are at university, and I think, well, what else can I do? I don't know if I can write. I don't know if I'd be able to write the book. I don't know if it'll ever finish or be any success at all. But I feel like it's something I need to do. I remember, I think I've gone off tangent, but in terms of, yes, I think the landscape is changing a lot. There's a lot of work still to do, but there's hope for everyone.
I just wanted to say, sorry, Naima, one small thing. The landscape is changing, but yeah, it's at glacial rates. Sometimes you still hear when, the book's been pitched that, oh, they already have their South Asian title for the quarter. From all of South Asia, they have the one title for the quarter. So, how do you compete with that? That's a rhetorical question. You then have to, as a writer, talk yourself out of writing from the backward success formula. I'm going to write a title that will be topical and timely and literary and all that, and make it onto that really narrow space, the one quarterly South Asian title. Or you ignore all that and you just write your plotless, feeling-infused thing, such as I do.
Pray for the best.
Sorry to interrupt. There are millions of...
I'm just going to add real quick that I think in the US, it comes down to genre a lot also. If you are a literary writer, it's definitely, like you're saying, Farah, it's much harder to find that space on a list, on an editorial list. However, I think in the world of the romance genre and perhaps murder and thriller, where there's a lot, there people, seems to be that, especially in the romance writing world, there are a lot of readers who are willing to shell out, buy books all the time. And therefore, those doors are open to it. Because in the US, the lists I see and it's lovely, they're just romance writers, Desi, and by Desi, I mean, Pakistani, Indian, Bangladeshi, etc. New books all the time. So I think sometimes it's genre specific also, because on the one hand, one could look at that and say, wow, everyone's doing great. But when you're in the business, the nuances and the complexities of exactly what is and what is not doing better than something else.
It's really interesting to hear that, Sonia, because in the UK, as an agent and my colleagues, we were constantly looking for romance or genre writing from people of color or underrepresented writers, and not finding it. It was really difficult. So we ran schemes to say, send in your work. There were prizes. We worked with other publishers to bring in more crime or romantic fiction from underrepresented communities. So it's interesting what's happening on the other side of the pond, so to speak.
I just want to again quickly say that for me, literary is also a genre. It's interesting how genres seem to cover everything else except literally seems to be this lofty whatever. Exactly. I write literary fiction myself, but that too is a genre in its own. Everyone is equal. Everyone works hard. Every genre works hard. And sometimes it's the editors who decide where they want to slot your book rather than what you have technically written. So,
and there's also a significant bit of overlap in all these genres. I don't think they're so etched in black and white. So, Faiqa, I'm interested to know, how would you say the experience of finding your voice looks like on the inside. What elements need to come together in order for a writer to say, okay, I found my voice now?
I don't know. I mean, for me, it wasn't something conscious. I mean, when you've been sort of in that mode of reading and writing, and you know that these are like, I told you I've been writing, but it's just that I didn't send them out. So it sort of perhaps developed gradually. When the more you write, the more it will develop. And I am a firm believer of not, just finishing your manuscript and then, shipping it off. You have to sort of let it be, let it, sort of stay there, and then go back to it and refine it. So I think that's when you gradually come to that point when you realize that, okay, how could I have written this? This is not me at all. Where did the sentence come from? Or, as you're reading, you realize, I mean, voice is something that is very innate. It's, I think, very natural, very unconscious. And there are some writers who, even in nonfiction, there's a voice. Perhaps especially in nonfiction, there's a voice. So that, I think it's very natural. You can't really fake it, and you can't really think about it. I mean, I don't know. What do the other writers think?
I think also it comes with experience. I think a new first-time writer might be very self-conscious.
Yeah.
And, but if you've been writing, as you say, for a long time, and you read a lot, you have to read. You can't be a writer without reading. Eventually, it feels like second nature. You don't even think about it. But I've worked with, very young, when I say young, emerging writers, let's use a better word, and they sometimes struggle to find their voice. And it's like, as a mentor or a fellow writer, it's kind of really important to listen to sort of constructive criticism, and to give them the confidence. Actually, it's a lot about giving them the confidence and the permission to write authentically, write from from who they are, and to be able to express that on the page.
Rukhsana, that brings me to the importance of community in the journey. I have to say that when I started out, the community wasn't a given. I feel that over time, over this period of 5 years, I've slowly forged a group of friends, colleagues whom I trust with feedback, on first drafts as well as decisions, etc. I'm interested to know how this journey of building a community in this extremely lonely work has been for all the writers here. Farah?
It's been patchy. I live in Dubai, and though I am currently in the process of relocating to London, so I hope to get into a bigger community space. But while I was living here for all the past years, my community was poets. I got into, I met lovely, lovely poets. When I first took part at the Emirates Lit Fest here, it was as a poet, and I was kicking myself standing up at the mic saying, why did I sign up for this? I write one poem a year. But again, at the end of the day, it was the fact that we were all writing, that we were listening to each other's words. And slowly over time, I met other writers here. I mean, there are big groups. But here as in newly forming communities, you have to be ready to either put yourself a lot out there into meeting people and into joining writing circles and stuff like that. Or you have to be kind of content with, okay, it's not happening right now, and I'm not going to do all the hard work, because it's hard sometimes. It takes a lot out of you. So I think I've let it happen really slowly and organically. And now that it has, I'm moving away. So, but I've also met people, like if I've gone to a writer's conference, and then, we've kind of stuck together for the past 3 years, and we read each other's works. But and lately, what I've been finding myself doing is gravitating toward all these writers from Pakistan somehow. There's so many. I find like niche little journals that publish in Punjabi, but translated poems. I didn't know that existed. And, you know, until you just come across it, okay, this also exists in Pakistan, or like so-and-so college has a really good literary journal, and then you read their works. So people are writing a lot back home, which is Pakistan for me. And for me, kind of reconnecting with that community, I mean, I call them community. Maybe I'm super diasporic to them, but for me, you know, that also reminds me of why I write. It's because they're writing away from the eyes of the Western world, what is acceptable or hot or topical. They're writing what they want to write generally. So it's good to be in touch with that.
I've sorry, just wanted to add very quickly that I've also recently been on that very same journey, but as an agent and an editor, craving more authentic stories from Pakistan. You know, not just the cosmopolitan stories and cosmopolitan lives of lots of writers who come from very sort of elite backgrounds, which, you know, I'm not dismissing any of that or criticizing it. Some wonderful books. But, you know, coming from a rural background, where are those stories, you know, and like discovering them, and the books in translation from Punjabi and all the other like minority languages in Pakistan, finding little niche, you know, literary magazines. And it's been fascinating, you know, like that insight into publishing and writing in Pakistan.
There's such a wealth of works to be discovered in translation. Yeah. That brings me to another question, which is, Farah, you mentioned communities being, you know, local to certain places, and you mentioned this entire wealth of writers, untapped for the most part and unknown to many of us. I mean, it's a constant journey of discovery, who are writing in Pakistan, and we'd agree that they are writing away from the pressure of the Western gaze. I want to ask, there is an argument made for the fact that if you're a Pakistani writing stories, then you should be content with having your work published locally, and over time it can have ripples and, you know, move out in the broader world. What are your thoughts about that? Because personally, I know that it feels very limiting, or it feels like you're playing to a very small audience if you're only publishing in South Asia. And if you put in the hard work, if you have a story to tell, why shouldn't your work go out to wider audiences? So what's your way of thinking around it? My question to everyone.
I mean, for me, my instinctive answer to whenever I speak to college or university students and they ask like these questions, I don't want to say starry-eyed, but I mean, I'm not a star to look at, but like they look at the whole Western publishing process as the only frontier to cross, the only meaningful frontier to cross. But my instinctive answer to them has always been to make their own communities stronger back home, because otherwise it'll just be one-way traffic of looking for affirmation from a different audience altogether. And that can happen in its own time. And that is, I mean, who wouldn't want that? But it's, again, it's not all the same path. Not everyone who's recognized by the West, or like, you know, like you said, the International Man Booker Prize, for example, it's a fantastic badge of honor to have, but it might not translate to many copies being sold. Yeah. So at what point do you decide this is success and this is not success, and this is recognition and this is not recognition? Having more of minority people as agents and as publishers definitely will help get that writerly traffic more into notice in the Western world. But while that is happening simultaneously back home, people should make their own community stronger, start their own lit journals, their own salons, their own prizes. We have money. There's enough people to fund stuff like that. Make our own festivals as well, fringe festivals. There's no shortage of talent, and we don't always have to constantly be looking toward the West. But yes, when it comes to the money aspect of getting published and making a living out of it, but Rukhsana burst that bubble for us. There's no money in it anywhere anyway, so get published in the US, UK, or South Asia, it's kind of all the same.
I'm always very, I lose clients that way, actually. I meet the client for the first time and I say, there's no money. And I hear back from them. And then they come back saying, okay. Well, oh, you just said something and I was going to say something to it, but I've forgotten what it is. So carry on.
Just conscious of time, we're nearing the last 10-15 minutes of the talk. And I'm just saying that I would be interested to know, if you were to address your younger selves, your pre-first book selves, what would you say about becoming wiser in this journey, which is clearly not easy? Faiqa.
I think, Naima, for me, it would be networking. I am not good at that. I was, I didn't focus on networking at all. I'm just, focused on my writing, and, that's it. Because, I think when we start writing, that is why we write, because we're already, lonely people, or we are not, extroverted people. That's why we turn to writing or turn to books. So to then have to, finish that journey of becoming that writer, and then suddenly you're asked to become the exact opposite of what made you a writer, be extroverted, meet people. It's a huge jump, and it's something that I just didn't do. I chose not to. And I think in this day and age, it's something one must, perhaps. Although, I mean, there are writers who are not doing it and they're successful enough. So I'm not sure if I would take my advice, but that's the advice I would give.
Sonia, you look like you had something to say.
Yeah, I've never been much of a networker and all the other shenanigans that come with it, and I have no desire to be that even now. Sure, does that mean then you have to look for the good agent, and luck does play a bit part of it. I mean, there's talent, there's hard work, but then there's luck also, right place, right time, right whatever. I mean, I always go back to Khalid Hosseini's example with The Kite Runner. When The Kite Runner came out, no one really, it's not like it suddenly caught on like wildfire. And then unfortunately, politics became such, Afghanistan, etc., that people, the readers of a certain place, wanted to find out about this country. And but had he written a lovely book? Of course he had. So it's a bit of all of this stuff going on. If I could go back and give myself advice, I would I think perhaps in retrospect, being older, I think I would have perhaps drifted into writing. I think I stayed in writing as long as I have, because it speaks to me at several levels. But I would say, for in each time period is different. Me going back into the 90s, Sonia, and telling her what to do, the landscape is very different now. So to current writers today, I would say, I'd have a different set of whatever, different advice. On top of that, I will say that, let's be honest, our writing communities, if you find your cohorts and stuff, that's great. But sometimes minority writing communities and otherwise can still be very, very hierarchical. Someone who's made it might not necessarily now want to do any trickle down or anything at all, oftentimes not. So everyone's sitting in their little, hanging on to their things. And for me, I hope that I am as generous as possible. I remember when I first started out, I wrote to a few very so-called big writers asking for advice, because there was nothing there. There was no internet, there was anything. And I was literally told by a very big writer, unlike Mohsin Hamid, you did not go to, where I forget where he studied. Where did he go to school? Anywhere, and he studied with Toni Morrison for a while. So therefore, you should just quit writing, because you don't have those contacts and you don't have this, that, and the other. I remember putting the phone down, utterly shocked, because this was not what I was expecting to hear at all. I was expecting to hear some guidance, some not, and instead I was literally told, quit writing because you don't have the right, weight behind you. And I didn't quit writing. I forged forth, and it took me so long to finally get a novel out. Whereas for other people who perhaps had a different avenue, are different places. So what I would say is that please find the generosity in your hearts to always pay it forward, or always just be generous to each other. To build minority writers, our communities, our names, our places. Networking is something else, but being generous of spirit, mentioning each other in your interviews and stuff, you're just building on good. You're just building good rather than building small. So if that's my takeaway to everyone. you know, and if someone reaches out asking for help, help them. It takes 2 minutes if you can. It doesn't make you a lesser writer. It doesn't make you a lesser whatever. It makes you a better literary ambassador, if nothing else. And I would say that to everyone, big, small, starting, whatever, be generous.
That is such a beautiful message, Sonia. I remember, you know, what you're saying about minority literary communities being extremely hierarchical and very difficult to break into. I remember my initial struggles around translation projects, and while clearly the best people, the best translators to guide me would have been translators who were translating from Urdu and Punjabi into English, because that's the project I was working on. I was unable to build that relationship where I could look up to a senior translator and simply expect out of professionalism, just like I would do to a junior translator or somebody who's working on their first project. I was never able to get that advice. If anything, I was really discouraged by their remarks, and the project was put on hold for 2 years until I came to the UK, and I found a community here who has nothing to do with Urdu and Punjabi, but they believe in translation. So they were able to offer advice and support, which, you know, unclogged the project, and I was able to flow forward. And I will never forget that. And I cried because I was like, you know, this sort of support, I expect this as simple professionalism. It is, it's not humanity, it's not being extra kind, it's simple professionalism. So yeah, any thoughts on that, Farah?
The paid forward, 1,000,000%. The reaching out to writers. I mean, it's so hard to do that for guidance, for like a little bit of advice. You know, it's like kind of like knocking on a door, all meek and small, and you don't get an answer, or you get an answer, but that's like shut your project down.
Exactly.
I mean, that's terrible. So 100% paying it forward in small ways, or whatever way you can, even if it means looking at someone's story, or like Sonia said, mentioning them, takes nothing. Advice to my younger self, because I didn't start writing that long ago. I would say start writing when I was younger. So go further back in time. I always wanted to write. So what the hell were you doing anything else? Yeah, that would be it.
So my last question would be, despite all these challenges and despite all these struggles, what makes this process worth it? Because if there's something I can see very clearly is that none of us is about to quit anytime soon. So what makes this journey, what makes this process totally worth it? Rukhsana?
Wow, it's tricky. I just can't imagine a world where I just can't imagine my life without working with writers and bringing books into the world. I'm so passionate, like all of you, and my passion comes in working with writers and getting their stories out, like The Midwife, like you said, you know, like something I'm really passionate about. I will put 100% into it, even more. So just wanted to go back to Khaled Hosseini's book, The Kite Runner. So obviously he wrote that before everything, you know, turned terrible in Afghanistan, even though it's always been terrible. And then the book came out. So I know the editor, the acquiring editor, quite well. And I know lots of people. And the myth and the legend of that book is that she was so passionate about the book. Everybody, and she worked for Bloomsbury, which is like quite a big independent publisher. She spoke to everyone, from the cleaner to the publishing director to the managing director. She could not stop talking about the book. She just couldn't stop talking about it. And the publicist and the salespeople obviously were excited. There was so much passion to see. And that passion grew into this book exploding. There are other books that came out before then, not necessarily about Afghanistan, but they didn't do so well. And if you compare why, one of the biggest reasons is passion. And if you can get that throughout the team, then you're really in a good place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, passion. Sonia, Faiqa, Farah, last words on this?
I just wanted to quickly take Rukhsana's point, is that I think all the editors who perhaps hopefully take your book on are passionate about it, but then they're also working within a limited budget. Right? So if you've got one of the big wigs, again, it's so hierarchical. If you've got a big, you know, editor-in-chief, editor, whatever, they can put all their muscle and stuff behind it. Also, if you've got a junior editor, whatever, they only have so much clout themselves. So, you know, at least that's what I've seen with Unmarriageable, because Unmarriageable was a huge surprise for me. I really didn't think it was sell. The agent I had didn't know what was happening. So again, my advice is please find an agent who is conversant in minority publishing and stuff, rather than going for someone for whom you might be their one and only, you know, filling in a roster or whatever, no matter how big or small that agent. That's very important. But I didn't think it would sell because it's a book completely set in Pakistan. It's not immigrant fiction. It's not your usual. And on top of that, it's a post-colonial retelling, right? It's my writing back to empire. It's my retransplanting British colonialism, linguistic power and stuff, and taking it back and setting it in Pakistan. So I didn't know if it would sell. I didn't know how it would do. I was, and having so much heartbreak over 20 years, I just, you know, and I'll tell you, the agent who I had at that time didn't even want to sell it. He said, whatever. And so it was very difficult. I mean, it was very difficult to even get this on the whatever, but it did sell, and word of mouth has been terrific. And you know, people ask me, well, you must have gotten this, that. No, actually, it's word of mouth, and we can and this is where I think South Asian readership everywhere is something that one has to talk about also. Often I feel that because I've done so many book clubs and stuff, a lot of book clubs will, of course, they choose 10 to 12 books a year. And sometimes they're just going to choose one minority book or writer in their 12 to 10 books. Sometimes I see South Asian book clubs, if there are many of those, they also have that same system. They'll choose one Pakistani author.
Oh.
And the rest of the months they're reading other authors, or they're even on their blogging, on their book reviewing, on their anything. And of course, that is again because of colonialism, we have grown up being so comfortable with stories from other places that there are stories, but that's not the flip, and that's not the reverse. So I've noticed all these things after Unmarriageable has come out, because you know, you're in one boat before you have a book come out. Then when you have a book come out that's done fairly well, that people are still, you know, liking, talking about, you see a lot of different things also. But why did this one break out? Why did this one? So it's been, you know, interesting. Again, I can go back and say, if you're passionate about writing, stick to it, write. What you're passionate about, hopefully, is to tell a story. And that's the medium that you converse with the world in. And then the publishing will take, I mean, at this point, I quit every day. You asked about quitting. I quit every night. Faiqa, all my writer friends are a witness. I'm constantly saying, I'm done, I quit, I'm done. And probably I am. And then,
you know, something I will say is that you write the book and then you don't know what's going to happen. You just don't know. There's no science in publishing. There is a magic thing, but it's I don't know what the formula is really. It's the right book, right time, as you were saying earlier. But there is no science. We as agents and editors struggle with the same thing. And actually, I'll give you an example of Richard Osman's book, The Thursday Detective Club, that's doing phenomenally well. It's like a bestseller everywhere. If the book had come to me, I would have passed on it because I didn't get it. I wouldn't know how to sell it or publish it. But the agent it went to, she immediately saw vision for it and she did really well out of it. And he's done really well out of it. So it's finding the right editor and the right agent. And we're all very subjective readers. It's not a science.
Yeah. We'll close with Faiqa and Farah's remarks on this.
Nothing here except just saying that I agree completely with finding the right editor, the right agent. You might believe in your book and you might have written the thing that you saw a vision yourself for, but if to your agent or to your editor, it's not something they understand, there's only so much they can push, vouch for it. So
yeah,
Faiqa?
writing for me is just, my survival kit. It's my healing, it's my self-care, it's where I find myself. So even if I don't get published, I think writing is something I've always done and I will continue to do so. It's who I am. So yeah, no quitting for me.
That's a brilliant note to end the talk on. I thank you all once again for your presence today, and viewers, feel free to tag the authors directly on Twitter and ask any questions. Thank you, Sabine, once again, and have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
thank you.
Thank you.